In this video, we are going to take a look at how to factor polynomials. I've written down the steps to factoring a polynomial down below. If you don't know these steps already, my suggestion would be to pause the video and write them down so that you can refer back to it later. I'm not going to read them all off to you. I think it would be more beneficial for me to just show you how to do them. The few things that I want to point out, though, are the first two steps. The first two steps are to factor out the greatest common factor and write it in standard form. So what this means is if you have something like 2x squared plus 4x minus 16, you can factor out 2 because all of those are divisible by 2. So you would end up with x squared plus 2x minus 8. The second thing that I want you to notice is that it says to rearrange the equation into standard form. Remember, standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c. So if you're given something like 4x, let's try that again, 4x squared minus 16 plus 3x, just rearrange that so that it's in the same order. Or if you're given that and it's equal to 4, you need to bring everything to the same side of the equation by subtracting 4 on both sides. And then rearranging it so that it's the x squared, the x, and then your constant. And with that, we're going to jump right in. If you look at our first problem, 3x squared plus 7x minus 6, my first thing is to look for my greatest common factor. There isn't one. Both 3 and 7 are prime numbers, so they can't be divided by the same thing. And from there, I'm going to rearrange into standard form, which it's already there. And then I can really just get to work. So the next step is to multiply a times c. Remember, a and c are your first and last coefficients, so 3 and negative 6. When we multiply those, we get negative 18. From there, we want to find the factors of negative 18 that will add up to 7. So what can we multiply to get negative 18? That is a product of 2 and 9, as long as one of them is negative. And it's also a product of 6 and 3, as long as one of them is negative. And then, of course, 1 and 18, with 1 being negative. So, which of these two combinations can get me to 7? The only one that can get me to 7 is the 2 and the 9. And in order to do that, you have to subtract them. So because it's positive 7, our factors are going to be 9 and negative 2. If you struggle with figuring out your factors, there's actually something that you can do to help you. And that's going over to Desmos and plugging in a system of equations. Your systems of equations is going to be x times y is equal to negative 18, because that's what a times c is. And then they have to add up, so x plus y needs to add up to 7. Where it intersects is your factors. Once we know what the correct factors are, we're going to rewrite my original equation. So we'll do 3x squared, and instead of putting b, we're going to put the factors. So minus 2x plus 9x minus 6. With this information, we can fill out our box. In our box, the top left is our squared term. The bottom right is our constant. And then our factors go in the remaining boxes. And we want to factor out the rows and the columns. So if I first go right here, the only thing that can be factored out of both of those things is an x. And because my 3x squared is positive, that's going to be a positive x. Next, I'll factor out the next row. So 9x and minus 6. So both 9 and 6 are divisible by 3. And they don't both have an x, so I can't take out a variable. And because the 9 is positive, it's going to be a positive 3. And then I do the same thing in my columns. So 3x squared and 9x Both 3 and 9 are divisible by 3, and both of those things have an x in them, so I can take out x. And then lastly, I have my final column. So 2 and 6 are both divisible by 2. They both have an x, so I can't take out a variable, and they're both negative, so I can take out -2. So my factored polynomial is 3x minus 2, because that's what's on the top, and x plus 3. And then I have my answer. I'm going to do another one, but I'm going to speed it up a little. So my next problem, I have something that's already factored out the greatest common factor. You can't take anything else out. So I'm going to move on to my a times c, where a is 5 and c is -7. When I multiply those, I get -35. My factors of -35 are going to be -35 and +1. If you want to plug in a system of equations into Desmos, that would be that x times y is equal to -35, and x plus y is equal to our b term, -34. But if you don't need to do that, if you could look at it and know, that's great. From there, we're going to rewrite our original polynomial, so this up here, and replace in the factors that we just got. So we'll have 5x squared minus 35x plus x minus 7. And then we can create our box. So top left is going to be our squared term, so 5x squared. Bottom right is our c term, so -7. And then we write in our factors, -35x and x. And then we factor out. Our first row, 5x squared and -35x, both 5 and 35 are divisible by 5. And they both have an x, so they're divisible by x. If we look at our next row, x and -7, nothing can really be taken out of either of those except for 1. Then we'll look at our columns. So 5x squared and x, you can take x out of both of those because there's a little invisible 1. The only thing both 5 and 1 are divisible by is 1. So you could technically write it there, but it looks a little silly. And then lastly, we have -35x and -7. Both of those are going to be divisible by -7. So our final answer would be 5x plus 1 times x minus 7. Moving on, we have a couple of special cases. These special cases are actually way easier than a lot of us think of them as. If we look at this problem, the first thing we want to do, because these both have an x term, we're not going to do that whole box method. All we have to do is look at what 4 and 12 are both divisible by. Those are both divisible by 4, so we're going to take that out. And because there's an x in both of them, I can also take an x out. And then what's left? So if I took 4x squared and divided it by 4x, I'm left with just x. If I took 12x divided by 4x, I'm just left with +3. And that's my answer. It's that simple. And then lastly, we have this problem right here. If you look at this and you notice right away that both of these are perfect squares, this becomes super simple. All you have to do is take the square root of both of those terms, so of a and of c. The square root of 4 is 2. The square root of 16 is 4. And then, because this is a minus sign, one is positive, one is negative. And that's it. That's our answer. Hopefully you found this video helpful. I would suggest getting some extra practice in, and if you have any questions, feel free to comment down below.